Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points Podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Welcome to the show. Today, Jennifer joins us again, and we've got a great episode where we deliver very practical tips on how to raise your vibe and feel good during this time of uncertainty. And she is giving away free online yoga with her classes. You can go to her Instagram at Jennifer Panza, click on that link tree, find the tab that says Yogi Approved or Free Yoga, and follow that link, and you're going to get hooked up with a month of free online classes for her. So it's a great addition to help support what we talk about in the show. So thank you guys for being here, and enjoy the episode. And we're live. Jennifer's in the house. Welcome back to the show.
We're live.
It's been a long time since you've been here.
We're alive. We're still in the house.
How you feeling about that, Jen?
Well, I found that when I am not caffeinated in any way, it's much easier to be in the house than when I have too much matcha tea and I start running around in circles.
Yeah, you were like freaking out the other night.
Yeah. I didn't use a spoon to put the matcha to calculate how much matcha I was putting in my matcha latte.
Seems to be a theme of you not measuring things.
Yeah, and then it was just like a little bit too much, and it greatly affects me. Turns out that I am highly affected by all substances.
Yeah, you were like wide awake at 1 a.m.
Yeah, I put on so many essential oils to calm me down. It was amazing. I was actually last night in the bed. It still smelled like vetiver because
From the other night.
Yeah, from the other night because I used so much of it. It was amazing. Well, it worked. I fell asleep right after that. So
We should have had you put them on like way earlier.
yeah, I had no clue that it was still the matcha affecting me. I thought it had already gone through my system and I was just being like a little quarantine crazy. But then the next day when I was really tired, it was very clear that I was just on a matcha hangover.
Well, we've also gotten like in the bad habit of, not a bad habit, but like we've been watching TikTok at night, and like
That's true.
That's definitely not helpful when it comes to inducing a good sleep environment, but it is fun to laugh.
That's because I started doing TikTok videos, dancing in the room, trying to convince you to learn dances. 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So why'd you invite me on the show, Jim?
Did I invite you on the show, or did you invite yourself on the show?
Ooh, that's a good question. I was like, hey, it's Friday. Aren't we recording a podcast this week?
Yeah. So that's how it went. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about, like, you know, I've been going in these like wormholes of, you know, like trying to understand what's happening in like the political world, and, you know, certainly like some quote unquote conspiracy theories, and just trying to like stay alert, and like way more so than I ever have before. Normally I just don't like check the news at all. And one of the things that like I've been aware of, as like, especially Facebook is like the worst. Like if I spend too much time in Facebook, I've found that like my energy level, like everything just gets heightened in like a totally unnecessary way. You know what I mean? And so I was thinking about how like my instinct, fortunately, because I've been teaching this stuff for so long, is like my instinct is to come back to the breath. And my instinct is to like return to like just a natural state of like being mindful of my breathing when it comes to being like, okay, I don't necessarily like how I'm feeling here. Like, what can I do to shift that, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I thought it'd be good for us to talk about like breathing and breath work and the kind of the value of that. I mean, I know it's cliched to be like, take a deep breath. But when I was writing my book, Unlearning Stress, and I was thinking about like, what's the most important thing? I was like, if I only get one chapter with somebody, if they're only going to read one chapter, like what is like the main takeaway? And so I made the first chapter all about deep breathing because it's like, you know, yeah, there's a lot of other things that are important. You got to like weed out the mind garden, you know, to pull out those thoughts that are unhealthy and unsupportive. But ultimately, like if you can come back to the breath and if you can consciously engage with your breathing, then you can shift your state, especially out of like that fight or flight response and into a more calm place. And then from there, it can be easier to do all of the sort of the mindset work and like all of the other things. But since I wrote that book, since I published it, I've been exposed to all sorts of other different kind of like breath work modalities. And, you know, I've noticed in you that when you come back in from your exercise, there's a big difference in your energy from when you have like just worked out or when you've worked out or just done the breath work. Like when you have engaged in the breath work, it's a very noticeable change in your demeanor, more so than just if you like had a strong workout.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's been one of the biggest changes, I would say, in my yoga practice, in my personal yoga practice over the last 2 years or so, I would say, has been that I went from really just focusing more on the physical posture, the physical postures, and maybe I would do some, you know, seated meditation at the end of my practice. But, you know, the more quote unquote advanced, I guess, as we call it in yoga, you get, the more you realize the deeper connections that the breath has on the whole body. So I don't necessarily know if it's an advanced yoga. For me, it almost feels more basic. But at the same time, the profound energy shifts that I experience in my body is crazy. Like, I actually just filmed in my most recent yoga video. We got to do this a little bit, and in my Yogi Approved video, and the response that people have been giving me is great too, because I realize that people aren't as much in a vinyasa class doing some of the breath work and some of the ancient techniques, just because it isn't really taught to us in teacher trainings. Like, we do a lot of poses, we do a lot of, you know, they teach us some of the different pranayamas, but I guess for me, it just didn't really click, or in a way that I felt dramatic shifts in my body. But once I started doing more of the Kundalini and I started to really feel the breath, things started to totally change on how it worked within my body. Like, I didn't understand really like the holds at the top of your breath or at the bottom of the breath, and how to use the bandhas, where you're really like isolating the energy in your body.
Can you explain all of that? Like, what's pranayama and like, what are you talking about?
So pranayama means breath work, or bringing breath into the body, and breath, not just breath, but life force. So prana means life force. So when we look at energy work and we look at breath work, we're going into a different emerging, a different integration of the body mind, in my perspective. And one thing I think is interesting is that we can live without food for weeks. We can live without water for many days, but with our breath, right? It's just 2 minutes. So arguably, this is the most integral part of being alive, is the breathing. So when we truly can tap into harnessing the power of the breath, or that life force energy as it moves through our body, I think it could be the most single dramatic aspect that we can change within our own energy field if we activate it in the proper way. So what I mean by the holds is, like, when you breathe in, like, let's just all take a deep breath together. And if you slightly tuck your chin and you kind of close off the back of your throat, and then you lift the pelvic floor, so engaging in your pelvic floor muscles, that's called a hold or a lock.
Like the muscles that keep you from, like, that stop the pee stream?
Exactly.
Like
exactly. Or for men, it's a little more like squeezing the anus than it is for women, is more lifting the vagina, but it's basically a combination of both. And the significance of this in the yogic perspective is that your body is like a vessel. And when, our mouth and then our root are two places of the vessel where that energy or that life force can escape. So when you're doing breath work, if you're at the top of the breath or at the bottom of the exhale, if you're holding, and that can be just a basic pause, then that holding and that drawing inward, and then also using the muscles, which is known as the bandhas, to be able to draw the pelvic floor up for Mula Bandha, pulling the navel in, which is Uddiyana Bandha, and then tucking the chin for Jalandhara, while you hold in, that can actually contain the energy within your torso. And then you can start to move it up and down your spine, which helps to unblock the chakras and create a kind of like an energy highway, which is known as Kundalini.
How do you move that if you're not breathing?
So you're
talking about moving it while you're holding it?
Yeah. So this is where it's been a little interesting for me to discover this, but basically it's a physical sensation of like, as you're tucking your chin and you're kind of blocking your throat, you can kind of almost like with your mind squeeze your lungs and move the energy down through your body. It sounds so crazy. And maybe this doesn't make sense to anyone. I don't know. I've never actually tried to explain this to anyone before. And then same thing from the root. So for me personally, I tend to carry a lot of my energy in my upper chakras and in my head. So for me, it's always a practice of like moving the energy from above down. But some people may feel more energy in their root, and then from squeezing and lifting, they're actually able to drive that life force from the base up. So for me, when I know that I have done successful quote unquote breath work, or it's different every time, but when I really feel the most impact in my body is when I can actually feel that energy move from my head and from my shoulders and actually push it all the way down into my root, in which case I feel this sensation known as Kundalini rising, which is where your whole body tingles. It's like your toes tingle, your feet tingle, you know, your root tingles. You feel this euphoric vibration around your whole entire body. And to me, when I'm able to move that, sometimes like I may feel that euphoric sensation in one part of my body, but when you can really open all the channels, that's when it's nice. It feels really good.
Well, it's interesting because you're not actually moving the breath through the body. I mean, you're like, but you're pushing the diaphragm down.
Correct.
Right? So to create more space in the lungs. But then there's like a more subtle experience, right? There's the Chinese talk about like where the mind goes, the chi follows. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about as you're talking, where,
Sure.
The actual breath isn't like going to the root, at least not that directly on the inhale. But as you go with your intention, you can start to feel, right? Am I sort of getting that right? I mean, I've experienced it with Qigong mostly, where,
Yes.
you can feel, I can feel sometimes and sense like energy moving in places, but I just want to be really clear that like when we're talking about breath work, it's not actually like the breath is touching your toes. It's like, it's a different thing.
It's a different thing, but the thing that I'd like to highlight is that the same way when you're doing Qigong, you feel it and it is still connected with the breath, because in Qigong, you're so mindful of your breath and you're breathing deeply. But when you're doing breath work, it's the same thing, meaning that energy is moving via the breath as the transporter, but that the energy is capable of moving without the breath. So your body is going under physiological changes. I mean, you're depriving yourself of oxygen and then flooding your body with oxygen. So that's just having a physiological effect on your body. But energetically, there's something else that's very different that's happening. And, I think that's where, for me, it gets exciting and interesting. And it's like a whole jungle out there, the breath work.
Can you talk about like that constriction in the throat? Because I've heard other yoga teachers talk about that, and like what is that and why is it so important, and how does someone do it?
So this is that work that I was mentioning before with the bandha. So a bandha literally translates to lock or a hold in Sanskrit, and is the idea of the vessel. So if you can imagine like, let's just say a vase that has water in it, right? So if you were to poke a hole in the bottom of the vase, the water could be able to drain out of the bottom of the vase. And then also if you do nothing, right, the water could evaporate out of the top, or you could tip it over and the water would pour out. So basically the bandhas, or that throat lock, or on the root as well, either end, is basically like how you would tie a water balloon. You can think of it. So it is creating a top for that vase and allowing the containment of the water, or the prana, to be beholden to a certain parts of your body. So in this case, you're restricting it from the chin down so that it stays within your energetic torso, from the base of your spine up through the throat. So how you do that, right, is a tuck of the chin, and you can kind of feel it when you're breathing. Like if you take a deep breath, and then as you tuck your chin, and then it, number one, makes you sit up taller so the energy can move. and then you feel that there is it's a constriction in the back of the throat, so that literally the breath or the energy is not moving out. So if your mouth is open and as you're breathing out, the vessel is open and you're releasing that prana or that life force, that energy. Does that make sense?
I think so. So could you like, again, walk somebody through like, what would this breathing practice look like?
So that's a great question. There's so many different breathing techniques, and
yeah, but this one that you're just talking about.
Oh.
So you're inhaling, you're holding, you're squeezing.
So actually through through yoga asana, this is something that not many people know about. And the more that I've gotten into yoga, the more that this is relevant. But really, it can be two ways, because I've seen it like when we do the Qigong exercises, they're actually doing the lock on the inhale, which is different than what I've experienced in yoga, which is where you do the lock on the exhale. But basically, when you're doing vinyasa yoga or any poses, or even if you're just sitting and doing breathing meditations, you're going to breathe in, expand. You're going to feel your body full of air, and then you're going to tuck the chin. You're going to lift the pelvic floor. You're going to pull the navel towards the spine. You're going to activate the bandhas. And then slowly you're going to breathe out. And then as you breathe out, you're going to keep breathing out until your whole body is empty. And then you're going to, again, lift the pelvic floor, pull the navel in and tuck the chin, and hold yourself empty. And then as you inhale, you're releasing, relaxing the bandhas, allowing your body to expand.
So you're locking at both maximum inhale and maximum exhale.
Exactly. And so this technique is through like the square breathing, where you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4.
Interesting.
That's an easy breathing technique to explore this, but you could do it in any pose. Like as you're doing sun salutations, right? Your inhale, you're lifting the pelvic floor. Exhale, you're breathing out, you're relaxing the bandhas, that type of practice.
So do people are yogis engaging the bandhas like that, like throughout the whole practice? Are they constantly squeezing the pelvic floor and
That's the
pulling
idea.
in the navel and the throat too?
Yep.
Wow.
And if you're doing every single pose in the most traditional way, all of the bandhas are activated, and you're even using a dristi, which is a point of focus for the eyes, which is the lock for your vision or for the third eye.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when we first started dating, we were talking about some yoga practice, or I don't know, I was looking at one of your sheets or a book or something, and I never knew, and I've dabbled in yoga since college, but I never knew that when the yoga teacher said to look up, that they're not talking about actually moving your head up. What they're talking about is keeping your head centered, or as if you were looking forward, but it's just your eyes are supposed to look up toward the third eye.
Yeah.
That had never been explained to me. So when I was an up dog and the teacher's look up, I'm craning my head trying to look up at the ceiling, with my chin, rather than just am I understanding that right?
Well, in up dog, you do want to retract your chin and then draw your chin to the sky, but also the dristi, the gaze, is towards the third eye. So that it's basically you're looking kind of cross-eyed, but you're looking up at your third eye, at your forehead. And yeah, this is the problem with modern yoga, is that including in my classes, I do my best to articulate these things, but when the music is blaring and you're just jumping around, there's a lack of delicate talk of the true purpose, which is where, the traditional, if you're doing Ashtanga yoga, you learn this from before you even start practicing, because it's the most important part of the practice, because it's a very traditional practice. So this is also why I'm passionate about educating yoga teachers, and why I have my continuing education for them, because I think the cueing is really important. So one of the things I always see in my students in my classes is people are cranking their neck, and a lot of times students will have neck pain after they've done a asana practice. And it's because they're doing this. They're looking with their head, cranking their neck instead of looking with your eyes. So I like to tell my students that. I say, relax your neck, tuck your chin, and then look with your eyes at that dristi. And I think that's helpful.
It's funny to me that yoga is I don't know of any other thing where people sign up for yoga teacher trainings without necessarily a desire to actually become a yoga teacher. They just want to learn more about like the tradition and all of the things. Like it seems to me that there's a huge gap, and I know you're feeling it like after the fact, like targeting and working specifically with like newly certified or yoga teachers who have been wanting to like build their business and like just they can't seem to get a handle on like the business side of things. But it would seem to me that there's like room for another type of training where it's like you can go in depth into yoga concepts without necessarily like signing up for a full yoga teacher training.
It's called Ashtanga. It's just a different type of yoga, you know? So, you know, most people I think are drawn into modern day yoga because they want to be fit, or they think it's cool, or there's something about it that is interesting to them. It has become a fad really in the last 20 years. But the more traditional practices, they actually don't even let you become a teacher until you're so advanced, and then they invite you to become a teacher. And the traditional model of learning yoga was that way, that the teacher, you had to find your own teacher and you had to ask the teacher to accept you as a student. And then the teacher would piece by piece help you build your own practice from the ground up. And it was extremely individualized. And it was, I mean, originally it was meant for 11-year-old boys in India who were of a certain class. They had to be of the Brahmin class, which is a very elite group of people. It wasn't available to just anybody. And it was a very specific code that you had to follow as you went through this, and a specific relationship of teacher to student. So the issue with the modern day yoga classes is they're group classes. They're meant for everybody. And because of that, people aren't able to truly learn based on their body and based on their energetic, emotional space of where they're at right then. And it's all based on movement. So you don't get really the philosophy and some of the other deeper workings of yoga, which is why once I figured out that's what was happening, that was a more traditional way to teach. That's why I was so excited to start teaching private lessons, and really because I could actually teach people the way that I wanted to be able to teach. And in a teacher training, that's the way that people can actually learn their own sequence, because learning your own sequence isn't taught really in group classes. It's just do what the teacher says. And in a teacher training, one of the main components of a yoga teacher training is to learn how to memorize a yoga sequence so that you can do it on your own in your own self-practice. And then because you know the sequence, then you would be able to safely guide someone else through it. But the truth is after a 200-hour yoga certification is hardly enough for someone to really, truly be able to effectively guide someone in a yoga practice.
Yeah. I mean, that personalized approach is amazing. And I remember when I had messed up my back years ago, you know, and you helped me use yoga as like rehab for it, you know, and like you were able to modify. I was terrified. I was like, I can't go to a yoga class. Like, you know, I was already in so much discomfort and I was afraid of re-injuring it, you know, and the one-on-one attention was awesome to help me to like retrust my body again.
Yeah. And I think that part of that is really missing in our modern day yoga culture, which is why I'm so passionate about educating more of the yoga teachers out there, because they don't know a lot of this stuff, and so many people out there are not able to go to a group fitness class because of injuries or because of emotional trauma experiences they've had, insecurities. You know, I don't know very many men. We were just talking about it with our friend when we were in Phoenix, that's a former baseball player, and he said I would never go to a group yoga class because of all of the dogma that's attached to it. Whereas he said I would go to like a basic men's stretching class, but because it's called yoga and he was insecure and he's a professional, you know, he's a professional athlete, that he would feel insecure about how he would show up in that class. And I think there's so many people like that who that would really benefit from one-on-one instruction, and not only learning the physical components of yoga, the poses and the stretches, but really learning the breathing, because that is everything with the practice. And that's what I love too in one-on-one classes, is that you hear their breath so much louder and you can work with a student on the breathing which I believe is the true foundation of the practice. And when we're really breathing deeply, you feel it. You feel it at the end of the class. Even if you're just to do 5 poses, and if you're breathing well, you'll be in a full sweat doing Ujjayi breath, and you will feel transformed by the end of it. 100%.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that we have this built-in alchemy. I mean, it's like people are looking for magic in their lives, and like we are magic. And the fact, like our lungs and the ability to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide is like, that's the alchemy that people are looking for to transform. Like if you are in a bad mood, if you're in a heavy state, if you're anxious, if you're scared, if you're uncertain, and there's a lot of that right now, like engaging consciously in the breath is like, that is the thing to transform it. I mean, you look at someone like Wim Hof, who's teaching people to do these ice baths and all of these like endurance things. And like the core of his training, as I understand it, because I haven't done it, but from what I have seen and heard and read, is breathing, right? He's engaging the breath consciously and using that to like get yourself into a different state. And, that would be like, if there's one takeaway that I'd want for someone to get from this particular podcast, it's that. It's like, if you don't like how you feel, pay attention to your breathing and start engaging consciously in a breathing practice. And if you like how you feel, awesome. Like use the breath to engage in the environment even more, to wake up even more, and to be even more engaged in like every facet of your life. And so for you, like where do the essential oils fit into this practice? Are you using them like on your hands? Are they on your yoga mat? Are you putting them on your chest? Are you using them before the breathing practice or after? Like explain to people, like if you can, a sort of like in a prescriptive way of what to use and how to use it.
I love that you said that, because I was just going to bring it up. I was going to say, and that's why I love essential oils, because I think first and foremost, I'll definitely give a routine for people that are interested in which oils to use for a breathwork experience. And also, I think that when we think about doing a practice, right, we think it's going to take us 5-10 minutes, an hour, or there's some sort of a extended time period that it takes to evoke these types of states. And the truth is, and why I got into oils in the first place, is that it's an excuse to breathe more deeply, because you can put a beautiful lavender, 1 drop in your hand, and of course, you're going to want to smell it, and you're going to want to smell it really deeply because it smells so good. So just taking 3 deep breaths with an oil in your hand can have a dramatic shift in state. And it takes 5 seconds or 10 seconds, depending on how long you breathe. So, first and foremost, I would say is starting there, because sometimes it can be overwhelming or you don't have time to go deeper into a longer practice, but just 3 breaths can totally change your state 100%. And it's scientifically proven to do so. So, but for those of you who are wanting to do a little more with the breath work, there's a couple of things that I really love to do before I do any type of breath work. The first one is Breathe essential oil. That one is a combination of peppermint, eucalyptus, lemon, and laurel leaf. And it smells kind of like a Vicks vapor rub. You could think of it, only it's the more delicious, real version that's going to work on the cellular level. And that, just rubbing the hands together, taking those few deep breaths, and then rubbing it on the chest helps to open the air pathways.
So you're putting like 1 or 2 drops on your hands.
Yep.
Smelling that, and then rubbing it on your chest. And
then rubbing it on the chest. And what that's going to do is clear the nasal passage, as some of the deep breathing requires, the air to move quickly through the nose and out of the nose, in which case, if you're stuck full of a bunch of boogers, it's not going to work. So literally clearing out the air pathway is really crucial. And rubbing it on the chest will help those breaths to become deeper and to open the chest and the lungs more, so that you're getting even more benefits from each breath. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then the other oil that's become my absolute favorite for breath work specifically is Elevation. And this one is citrus oils for the most part, also combined with Melissa oil. And Melissa is a very powerful essential oil. It has a lot of antiviral properties, but it's been used in meditation a lot too for many years. And what I like about this oil, this particular combination, is for some reason, I don't really actually use this oil in many other instances or necessarily like it. But when I think of breathwork, this is the main oil that I love to use. And I would use this towards the end of the breathwork session. After you're done would be a great time to use it, putting it on your hands and just smelling it in. It is really soothing, very calming to the nervous system, and it's a very high vibration essential oil. So you really feel it. It's very uplifting and positive because it has that citrus in it. And of course, the name's elevation. So just the intention with the name really evokes that feeling. And I found that it sustains that energy shift when you do have the prana move throughout you, that it helps to extend that. So essential oils we think of as the amplifiers for the energy work that we're doing. Whatever experience you have using an essential oil in your practice is going to amplify the energetic effect that you had, which is really great.
And speaking of like oils and raising the vibe, we should probably mention, because this will come out soon, people might still have a chance to get the Mother's Day collection, which has an oil or an absolute that I've never smelled before, which is Blue Lotus.
Yeah, Blue Lotus is so cool. I mean, that kit is ridiculous. It's amazing. It has some of the most expensive essential oils, and also for women, it's the dream because it's all the beautiful flowers. So it's rose, neroli, jasmine, and then the Blue Lotus. And it is, that combination of oils is really, really awesome because it's really nice for perfume. But the lure, of course, is that Blue Lotus, which is originally was used in Egypt as an essential oil to create a higher connection or higher state of consciousness. And if you look, it's really cool to Google some of the artwork with the Egyptian blue lotuses. I just think it's stunning.
Yeah, they said it was connected to Ra, which is the sun god, and it seems to have strong like calming properties, and it seemed to really embody this kind of alchemical energy that we were talking about. Part of what I love about it is that it's harvested in the morning, right? In the morning light. And even the way that it looks with the blue flowers on the outside and the yellow on the middle, it's like, it's got that feeling of like yin bursting into yang, which is what we have at sunrise, right? We're going from the dark of night into the warmth and the brightness of daytime. And sometimes, that's what we're like, that's that kind of transformation that we're looking for, is it what I find, what a characteristic of very good health is being able to go from one state to another with not much impedance, and so the Blue Lotus for me really embodies that kind of transformative experience of going from yin into yang. It's like, how do we rise, or how do we step into a full state of alertness, kind of wiping the sleep out of our eyes, sort of on a spiritual level perhaps, so that we can really be alert and engage. And for me, that Blue Lotus and just the way that it smells, it has that kind of freshness to it that you get with the florals. It's really, really nice, but it's super limited. This is like turning into a sales pitch, but I was so excited about this particular oil, and it's been so nice, but it's a limited time offer. It's part of the Mother's Day collection, and these tend to sell out. So.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. I'm going to have to order more today because I was like, oh my gosh, I love it so much. It smells, everything that you said is just, it's such a delicate, you feel I think that you can truly feel and embody that energy that you were talking about. And for me, it's really connecting to that divine feminine energy of that power that each woman, I think, as we are our own lotus flowers, open to really connect with that energy, and to combine it with jasmine, which is another beautiful light floral oil that is very sought after and has been used as a feminine oil forever is huge. That one's actually really, really powerful for healing past sexual traumas. And I think as this, you know, the Her, Me Too movement, all of that kind of stuff that's happening right now, the jasmine oil combined with the Blue Lotus is beautiful because it's reclaiming our sexuality and then tapping that into a higher consciousness of forgiveness and light and evolution and transformation, which is wonderful.
Well, and if you combine that with all of that Bandha work where you're actually squeezing the pelvic floor as you practice this kind of breathing, that's going to be a lot of like conscious engagement as well.
Yeah. And then I think that, you know, we've, as you had Michelle Alva, our friend here on this podcast, but the conversation about sex and sexuality and being able to move in your own sexual energy and use it for healing powers is for good instead of evil. Yeah. is huge. And these oils definitely do that. So neroli is actually one of the original aphrodisiac oils. So this is an alternative to like a Viagra situation where the Indian brides used to wear it when they would get married to around the actual flowers around their neck in a lei form in order to excite their new husband. And so that's an interesting little fact about the neroli, but that's why we use it in some of these sensual blends or in perfumes, because it does activate that sensual aphrodisiac, that passionate energy within us. So it's
you
pretty
should order
cool.
more of that too then.
I don't think we need more of that in our house.
If you're placing an order today, let's order more of that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the breath work. You guys, if you want to dive deeper into this, right? I mean, practice the breath that Jenn was talking about. There's lots of different breathwork resources out there. I love that there's this like growing movement. There's a type of breathing called holotropic breathwork, which has like its own sort of subsets, but you can dive in and check that out. You can check out Wim Hof, WIMHOF, if you want to see more of what he's got going on. But you know, now that we've talked about it, you're tuning into it. I'm sure if you poke around, you'll start seeing more and more opportunities there. What was the woman that you took a class with?
Yeah, so there are some, you know, as I've been diving into breathwork, there are some different techniques and types of breathwork. So holotropic breathwork is super cool, and it's also really long. It's like a 3-hour kind of experience. Yeah. My friend Jenna Reese, who is out in LA, she studied under this man named David Elliott, and she said his is very intuitive. He said that he just felt the calling to a particular type of breath work. And for me, I like it. I think it's really cool. It's similar to holotropic, but it's different and it's really good. So she's great. And then also the breath work that I've been learning more about, which has the similar roots as Kundalini yoga, but it doesn't have the same structure. So it's a little more free-flowing, which is the Himalayan Kriya yoga, Sattva, which is a combination of more of the breath work with the asana, and it's not as linear and it's not a set system as the Kundalini breath work, which I like because there's a little more creativity, a little more flow, and you're able to pick and choose some of the practices to embody. So
nice. And if all of that sounds like really overwhelming, I'll give you the recommendation that I have in my book, which is real simple. You're going to inhale for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 5 seconds, and exhale for 6. You don't have to engage any of the muscles or the bandhas. You don't have to like be concerned about any of that stuff, though I think that practice is great and it's going to take you deeper. But if you just need like an immediate shift, you know, even better if you can grab your favorite essential oil, inhale for 4, hold it for 5, exhale for 6. It's a 15-second breath. You do 4 of those and you'll start to notice the change in your physiological state. So thank you guys as always for being here. Thank you, Jenn, for coming on and sharing your expertise. And have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy out there, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.